Hello, this is the Shoddy Strawman. Today I'm going to be going over the Little Cup Winter League replays. It's getting into the very final week coming up next week. This is the semi-finals between my team, the Bagons, versus Zigzagoon Platoon, which is headed by JCBC and H. Sawa. Pretty good friends of mine. Did really well in the Levi's Premier League last time. Hopefully we can make it to finals this time. But point is, I want to go over some high-level games. Go over what's good, what are they cooking in the lab, and all those other sorts of stuff, and hopefully you can get a lot of entertainment out of this. This is the first match played. I'm going to go over in not necessarily slot order, but the order in which these were played throughout the week in order to get a better understanding. But first off, we had Corkscrew versus Floss. Corkscrew is on Zigzagoon Platoon. Floss is my teammate. Floss has a Voltorb Diglett offensive core that can be really dangerous because of the result of Voltorb has access to Volt Switch, and if your opponent doesn't go into a ground type, then you can then go into Diglett, and that can be really annoying. It's very hard to deal with offensively. But on Corkscrew's side, we see a very unorthodox choice, Sprigatito. You don't see them very often, and for good reason. It's very odd when it comes to its stat spread and moves, so it's a very uncommon pick. And we'll see how well it does, especially because it's double grass, so you're not going to be throwing off the stab combination variable, your stab option in Petal Blizzard very often, so that's a bit weird. You also see Shelder. Shelder is going to be quite annoying on the condition that Floss has to use Brawler over here in order to deal with a decent amount of things, and you need to keep it healthy because it can take one move from Shelder and then be able to KO it back with a Thunder Punch or a Drain Punch, something like that. Nothing really lets it set up, except for maybe Wingull? Maybe? But I don't think so. Oh, Diglett. You have to be really careful of Diglett, because it'll let in the Shelder, and Shelder can then start doing stuff, and you don't have any priority, so that's really dangerous. Pretty bad matchup, all things considered. The good news is that you can do Terra stuff with Toadschool, Terra stuff with basically any of these mons, and they can deal with Shelder a bit better. I'm pretty sure that Voltorb at full health can deal with Shelder pretty alright. Wattrel is going to be really tricky. You have Diglett and Voltorb, which is pretty good at getting some chip on it. As well as Wingull, it's very fast. It can use knock it off. That's nice. Brawler speed ties and hits with Ice Punch. What am I thinking? And then you also have the grasses, which are kind of food for it, so you have to play around that kind of awkward. Toad should not be an issue, because you can do Terra Ice here, and then you can blast over it, and that's really nice. But also, you have Wingull. You have two grasses that can be able to deal with this pretty effectively. You also have a Grounded Poison, which helps you deal with Glimmet, which you can deal with pretty alright, because you already have Diglett and Voltorb. It's really hard for this to get a lot of progress. The main issue is going to be Zorua H, in addition to Shelder, because it can disguise as anything at once, possibly force in the Crab. Like, if it disguises as Shelder, what it can do is that, because you need to deal with Shelder using Brawler might just switch in if you're sleeping or in some way unable to deal with Shelder. So what you would do is that it forces it in, and then you can get a burn on it, and that really hampers its progress it can get versus your team. You do have good options for it, namely Toadschool and Wingull, because they can take the attacks pretty well. You can trap it, you get faster than with Voltorb. The good news is that besides what I'm assuming to be a Scarf Sprigatito, based on how this is kind of slow, the Voltorb and Diglett are going to go pretty hard versus this team. You just have to be very careful because of how Shelder's working, and Fungus can't take a Rock Blast, so that's a bit annoying. Lead matchups for each, I think that Floss wants to lead with Diglett and or Voltorb, because it covers everything except for the grasses. So, both teams are running two grass types. Interesting, I didn't even notice. But you can run either of those, and that's a pretty good idea. The issue is, how do you account for Zorua H? You could also lead pretty reliably Wingull, which I think Floss does, because it has a good matchup versus everything, and being able to knock the Wattrel, which is kind of annoying, is good. And also, you can switch to Diglett if you want to, and it'll mess that up. On Cork's end, I'm not sure what you want to lead with. I want to say Glimmet, because you can get rocks up. If this terrestrializes ice, then you get good chip on it. It's good for this. It's good for, like, most of the team, actually. Even though there's 3 resists, just being able to wear them down is really nice. And also being able to force some Toxic Spikes chip on, like, anything's also nice. I think if you're Cork, you lead Zorua H disguises Glimmet, something like that. Let's get into it. So what do they lead with? Glimmet, Voltorb, okay. So just led Hard Glimmet, assuming that Floss wouldn't go Diglett immediately. Probably because if you just lead Shelter, then I think... No, you don't win immediately because of Crab. But it's still really bad to do that, because it can go kind of wild. Glimmet going for Mud Shot versus Voltorb. I don't know why Floss didn't go for the Volt Switch there. It's really risk-free. I think the issue is that he doesn't want to waste his Terra too early. So in order to catch the Toad School switching in, or for that matter the Wattrel, you can go to your Toad, get some knockoff chip, that kind of stuff, be able to deal with it a lot better. And if they stay in, which Corkscrew does, well then you just have a really good check to Glimmet anyway. So that's really nice. So that's what happens. Mudshot does very minimal damage. And then it comes into Sprigatito, then you knock, which is perfectly fine. It is not Scarf Sprig, it is Eviolite, which is weird. I'm not really sure there's a lot of speed control on this team. Oh, that's probably Scarf Zorua H, isn't it? I'm not a big fan of Scarf Zorua H for the express purpose of I think Zorua U is much better because it has a much better spammable move in knockoff, which is stab and it has good attack, but that's what I'm getting from this. But also, like, it could just be nasty plot in order to wear down some checks that would normally be able to deal with Shelter, so you don't know for certain. But yeah, good play from Floss. Excuse me, knocking off Sprigatito, so that way you can get at least some amount of progress, regardless of like, oh yeah, I hit Glimmet and now it's Eviolite's knocked off or whatever, but now I know information. Actually, there could also be Scarf Glimmet as well. That's probably why you're so comfortable leading it. That's a possibility for sure. But afterwards, save play, go Fungus, no problems there. Make sure that, you know, this is kind of important for dealing with Glimmet as well as other Toad. It's good to be good for Zorua H. It's a knockoff user, so that means, like, there's a lot of progress to be had with it, and it's something you want to really preserve, and Fungus comes in pretty comfortably. And then you sleep Glimmet, because the two grasses that could take the sleep really don't want to. Sprigatito dies to Sludge Bomb. Toad School has actually a really rough time 1v1ing Fungus, which is kind of funny, because you wouldn't think it, but it does. But Fungus can come in, Spore Glimmet really safely, and that gives you a lot of free turns, because although it's not too important, it's still nice. And also, if it's Zorua H, then Caress, you just sleep that, and it's whatever. Stealth Rock's up, get some chip on Wingull, Voltorb, Fungus, that sort of stuff. So then go out to Voltorb on the free switch, and then you can force some progress. Cork's just sort of fine with going to Glimmet, though. Staying in, it's whatever. But then goes Terra Ghost, which is really annoying because it keeps the rocks up. And now Spikes. It's going to be really wearing down your team. And that doesn't kill. And then that comes out. That's not too bad. Too bad, because like, you can just sort of deal with it. Wingull comes in on Sludge Wave. I don't really agree with that too much. For the express purpose of, like, I feel like Glimmet was just gonna do too much there. That I don't really see why you would want to go Wingull, unless you're expecting another Mud Shot. But like, I mean, Voltorb, I think a lot of chip on Voltorb. So that's really yikes. So it's unfortunate. So like, there's not too much that Floss can do here. Like, yeah, you have to break Glimmet, so that way you can actually start spitting away your hazards. And turns out Sprigatito's quick attack, so Wingull goes down. And there's not really all that much you could do, even if Floss knows, oh, this is quick attack Sprig. Well, you can't really switch out your Wingull anyway. You don't really want to. You think it's probably Sucker Punch, because it's a lot stronger of an option. But it's pretty uncommon to see a Sprigatito anyway, so. Goes into Voltorb, which I think is pretty alright. You just have to be careful of... Oh, it has both, so, I mean, there you go. There's the Sucker. And that just does a lot of damage to Voltorb, which is annoying. And then it's obviously Zorua H, but because it's a Scarf Zorua H, you can't really tell. So then that's a really uncomfortable scenario. Gets chipped down quite a bit. Toad comes in. Sludge Bomb. No poison, which is unfortunate. Then gets knocked, which is pretty bad defensively. If you can get the poison, that's nice, but it's really hard to deal with Scarf Zorua H from here. I'm not really I feel like that was a misplay. because Glimmet was already slept by the time. It doesn't show on the UI because it's disguised as Zorua H. Well, Zorua H is disguised at it. So... Oh, no, it woke up. I'm dumb because it hit the twinkle one. What am I thinking? Alright, so let me go back a few turns then. So, you spore here, which isn't bad because you're probably like, oh, well, you know, they'll probably go to Wattrel because it can take your attacks pretty alright, and it's not going to take too much damage. Or you can go to Zorua H, so to catch that, he goes and tries to spore, which isn't bad by any means. But can't really do that. Has to go to Toad instead to take the Earth Power, which is perfectly fine. Just the issue is that Fugus is going to be really low, and it's really hard to not have it be there. That special defense trap doesn't matter too much. Also, good knock here to make sure that you cover anything that wants to switch in. Weaken Wattrel, weaken Toad, we'll kill Toad. Knock off the Choice Scarf from Zorua H, possibly have a Wingull win condition. But then T-Spikes get set up, but you can absorb them with Fungus, so it's all okay. This is probably Zorua H. So go to Fungus. Pretty sure it dies. Yeah. And there's no real way to defend against this. You go to Diglett. If it has Sucker, that's good. But also... Oh, right! It's the weird Diglett set that has Rock plus Rock. Alright. Yeah, and then Shelter comes on out. And more than likely, it's going to be Zorua H. So what can you do? Sack Crab, because it can't really do too much. Oh, it's actually just straight up Shelter. Okay. Oh, no, you don't sack Crab. You're doing that as the express purpose of, well, Shelter's probably going to try to set up, so in order to counter that. So that's good. And then, good double from Floss, I believe. Yep, goes into Wattrel here. And what that means is that, predicting that Shelter doesn't really want to be in there, it can't do too much to Crab, and you're probably going to take a Thunder Punch. You go to Wattrel with Volt Absorb. So Floss, in order to catch that, goes to Diglett on the switch, despite the fact that Shelter would kill it in one hit. And now goes for a Rock Blast, but misses, and that just means that's the end of the game. Unfortunately, Floss doesn't have enough resources to really be able to deal with anything else at this point. If this hit, it would have been a much different story, but you can't really do too much. And that's kind of bad. Bulk up, hoping that Wattrel misses the Hurricane, but just goes for Volt Switch, then goes to faster, Zorua H, and then it just kills, and that'll be the game. Which is a really unfortunate way to start the week, but I don't think Floss played this poorly either. I don't think anybody was expecting to have Eviolite Sprigatito and then Scarf Zorua H. It's really weird to see. So Cork got him with some really unorthodox playstyle, and also Shelter was really annoying because it means that you can't go to Crab, and it's very hard to play around. But we started off the week 0-1, which is pretty bad. Next game we had was Elfu versus Lunala, and I don't think I need to commentate much about this, because, actually no, I could do that. But I've already showed off this replay with Elfu before. It's Air Balloon Dig and Choice Scarf Gothita, so... This is actually a really smart play, is that he leads Crabrawler, because it pairs up well versus Diglett, it pairs up well versus basically everything here, except Wattrel. And that means that Wattrel is probably going to want to do, if not Volt Switch Hurricane, and you want to have this Diglett in, because if you can get this Diglett in, then what you can do is go to your own Diglett setup and then sweep the team. So, expecting Wattrel lead, goes Crabrawler, and then on the subsequent turn, goes Glimmet, Volt switches out. And the reason why that's good is that, oh, well, that's a terrible decision. Like, Wattrel just comes in, Volt switches, uses Diglett, and then you just get trapped. But you see, this is all a part of the master plan. Because now that Diglett is in, and we know that it's not Scarf because it's Life Orb. Scarf was a niche option in Gen 8, but just something to keep in mind. But Gothita comes in, then it uses Sucker Punch, gets tricked a Choice Scarf, and Lunala, not knowing this tech, earthquakes the Gothita. Gothita dies, at which point Diglett just comes in, uses Air Balloon, and then just sets up using Swords Dance and sweeps the entire team. Lunala's also not having this, so after Terra Dark Sucker Punch, Toad just sort of goes down, and that's the game. So next up we have Chaos 2333 versus Handpeel. Chaos is a recent addition to the team because one of our players got banned, so we need a sub. Chaos subbed in. And Chaos is doing a pretty interesting Zorua H strat turn core. Yeah, so what that means is you have a U-turner in Zorua H, and then you have a Volt Switcher in Wattrel, and their main idea is keep your opponent on the back foot, use a Volt Switch and U-turn to go into your good bonds, and make sure that your opponent can get very good progress. Combined with Diglett to trap whatever, like, oh, I'm going to go to Toad School, so that way I can deal with Glimmet, and then Glimmet U-turns out, and then you get to go to Wattrel. So your opponent has to go to Voltorb, so you Volt Switch into your Diglett, and then you can put pressure on that. It's a very powerful strategy that you can use, and that's what we're going with. Handpeel, on the other hand, is using Starly, and I'm pretty sure I even say at the beginning, why is there a Starly on my screen? Yes, why is there a Starly on my screen? When asked about this afterwards, JCBC and HSAWA said, oh, well, that's actually because it's really good anti-webs tech, and you can hit really hard because you have Reckless boosted Double Edges and Brave Birds, but then you also blanket a Glimmet kind of hard, so... as for whether I agree with this lead, I'm not sure. Because Chaos is kind of fine with leading, like, Pawn or Wattrel, which, I mean, led Wattrel anyway, and Handpeel plays well and does a U-turn. But it really forces some really awkward counterplay from Handpeel's part, because there's a Glimmet on the other side. I think he probably would have been better off leading something like Voltorb and seeing what Chaos is going to do. And most often, Voltorb is Terra Ice in order to beat over Wattrel, which is really good. So, I don't really think that you wanted to Terra anything else, honestly. Because Terra Ice is going to threaten a lot of stuff, and you also have some good checks to deal with Pawniard. You have stuff like Mare, you have your own Pawniard, you can burn Pawn with Zorua H. Otherwise, Voltorb just sort of takes over the game, and it's really hard to resist. So, I think that was pretty manageable, and I don't think this is, like, an awful lead matchup, because, like, oh yeah, you just got to see what your opponent's going to lead with. And if they lead poorly, then you get some free damage, but... U-turns, Toxic Debris gets set up, and then you go Mare in order to absorb Toxic Spikes. Then Toad comes in as your water check, that's fine, and then it gets some progress on enemy team via knock, which is good. Wear down the enemy team, set up your win conditions, which is likely Swords Dance Pawniard. There's a Glimmet here, Glimmet's a hazard setter, so more than likely this is going to be Swords Dance Pawniard, so you have to be really wary of that. And Voltorb doesn't even give that setup opportunity really well. But yeah, Toad comes in order to take the possible Spore. And then Chaos, Power Whips, really good there. Get a whole bunch of damage on Toad, keep it worn down. It's one of the main checks to Diglett, the other being Starly. Everything else gets kind of walloped by it, except for Zorua H. So being able to wear this down really opens that up. And also, it's one of the things that checks Pawniard, because it has Earth Power most of the time. And then Rapid Spin wins the speed tie between Toads, but this is sure what you have to do. It's probably max speed. I'm not sure if I agree with... No, that's kind of your best bet, I think, is going Starly there. Or Pawn, actually. Pawn's fine, too. But in order to check to see, well, what's going on... Oh, yeah, that actually that also could be... That Starly could be Zorua H as an illusion. Don't know yet. So that was actually kind of... Now that I think about it. Really good play on Chaos's end, making sure that Wattrel, which really annoys his team otherwise, doesn't get knocked off by Zorua H, and playing it safe, going to Glimmet, because that also annoys the team, so that's good. So, back to here, and then Starlight just U-turns out on Wattrel, Voltorb comes in, and I believe Chaos pivots to Pawniard, yes, on the Terra Ice. Pawniard comes in, takes it really well, and then Volt switches out, which is perfectly fine. Mare comes in, and then I think you Night Slash. Yep. So from here, I think the Chaos just goes back to Toad. But there's not really all that much the Handpeel can do, except maybe go to Scarf Starly. Recovers just to make sure. Knocks off Mare, which is really bad for Han. And you can't even claim Toad's School, because if you do, then Diglett just comes in and traps you, and at which point you have to give up your Terra in order to preserve a knocked off Mare, which is pretty bad. And that does a lot of damage. Yeah, and you don't want to preserve this, because I'm pretty sure Diglett kills it even without. And you have Air Balloon. Comes in and claims. Now, I think that if you're Handpeel, you kind of have to go Starly and start attacking, but Glimmet's really bad for this team, especially now that Toad's gone. So, oh, goes Voltorb because you're Terra Ice, so you also don't want to proc Glimmet's poison from Toxic Spikes, and your Spinner's gone, your Grounded Poison's gone. So in order to do that, and because this isn't really a powerful Diglett, you can just Terra Blast Ice really comfortably here. So then Chaos goes back to Pawn, takes basically nothing, and I really like this play from Chaos, goes to Wattrel. on the Volt switch because you have to preserve Voltorb because that's basically your win condition at this point. Chaos Play is really smart, and because of this, you can then do Terra Water Wattrel, takes Terra Blast perfectly fine. I think Discharge, yeah. So, really well played. I really like that sequencing of like, oh, well, on Diglett, you're going to Terra Blast Ice. Then from there, you're going to go Pawniard. What's Pawniard going to draw on? It's going to draw an electric move. So then from there, you just go to Watt. Perfectly fine. A-OK. C'est la vie. And then from here, Pawniard has to go and deal with Wattrel, kind of. But then you can just Volt Switch out because Voltorb no longer resists it because it's an Ice type. And then Diglett just comes on in. And then, although Sucker can do a lot of damage, it doesn't kill. Pawniard's still gone. And that's basically a wrap at this point because Glimit's too healthy for Starly. Voltorb can't break over Wattrel, and although you only have, well, like, you have Glimmet and it has to deal with Starly, you have a lot of good stuff here. Way too many resources, and if need be, you can be Zoro Age. I'm not even sure what it is in this match. Could have come in before, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. Then you go Glimmet. Does it hit? Oh, no, it doesn't. Toxic Debris, which is really good, because then this starts getting worn down, which you know is a Zoro H because it's not Terra Ice, and also it's at full health, when Possible Illusion 1 over here was chipped down, so there you go. Shadow Ball, eats it like a champ, sets up Stealth Rocks. The only issue is that Starly can do some stuff after this because you'll have very limited checks. But we'll see why you don't run Starly very often in a bit, but it's still a really good pivot. And then I think you can go Zero. You go Pawniard, I think. Oh, you just let them go down. That's fine too. Because then you can go to Wattrel, and surprise, surprise, it's actually Zero H. I think Handpeel was just sort of clicking through at this point because you really were behind, and I don't really blame him for that. But yeah, just sort of takes it, knocks off. It's all okay. I don't think that he. Does he do it again? No, he just loses the speed type, yeah. At this point, it's pretty much gone. But then, oh, well, you know, Starly can do a lot of progress because it's got Reckless Brave Birds. And then you see this, and Zero H just takes it like a champ for whatever reason. And it's just so sad because Starly looks so cool on paper. It's like, oh yeah, it can threaten out Toad and stuff like that, but then it just does that. It's just very sad because Reckless doesn't even... Yeah, it's definitely like kicking through, making sure, like, something can get done, but yeah, at this point, then Voltorb just sort of dies. You don't really mind Zorowood going down here, because Voltorb's just gonna get walled by Wattrel, and that's gonna be it. Very well played by Chaos, so now we're up 2-1, and that's pretty good for us, gotta say. And then next up we have BB Scorm versus JCBC. This is a really weird matchup, because BB Scorm doesn't have a good way of dealing with Surskit or denying the hazard. And there's two ghosts on JCBC's side, as well as a Diglett, so Diglett's going to be really annoying for both Glimmet and Fuecoco. So there's no great way to really deal with it. And like JCBC has really, really good time here, because Grievard and Fuecoco are really slow on baseline, and the only thing that's immune to webs is Watt, and you can really easily overwhelm that with a combination of Diglett, Crab, and Stunky. So this is a pretty bad matchup going into it. And BB Scorm, Diglett lead. I expect that what he was seeing was like, oh yeah, it was probably going to be Surskit lead, and because of that, I can threaten it, and I probably take one as Glimmet, but like, nah, it's Diglett lead. Which, I understand from JCBC's point of view, because like, oh yeah, I can just go like, if it's Mankey, then I can do something else, it's whatever. But it's really hard to deal with. So, you Terra to make sure that Glimmet can actually get some hazards up. So get some spikes, but then Diglett reveals Terra Ice, and then Glimmet dies. And that means that it's exceedingly hard to deal with. But luckily you have Scarf Mankey in the back. But, like, the main issue is that from the team structure, and we'll see Stunky come in, the main thing from the team structure is, oh, it's a Glimmet, and then you also have Grievard. It's meant to be a hazard stack team pretty obviously. Like, oh, I have a Pokemon that sets a whole bunch of hazards, and then we have the Pokemon that's really good at blocking them and also can do like really annoying force switches, and you lose it like turn 1. It's going to be a really hard battle from there. And then Mankey just gets free close combat, and I'm expecting JCBC to go, yeah, you might as well, it's free, you get to preserve Stunky, but also BB Scorm just has to go for it anyway, And it's kind of hard to say, like, oh, well, Bramblin's going to come in. It's like, yeah, but it's really hard to punish Bramblin. It's like, oh, I can go to Grievard, I can go to Toad, yeah, but, like, if you guess wrong, and JCBC is just staying in with Stunky and just fire blasting for whatever reason, then you're really cooked. So you have to try and make a play there, and it's really hard. Grievard takes Power Whip from Brimble like a champ. Then Diglett comes in. This is actually Zorua H, so it takes the Ice Fang just fine. Fuecoco comes in, and it eats that pretty well, which is pretty crazy. But then Surskit comes in, it's really hard to deny. Like, slacking off there's not even bad, because what happens if Zorua H actually attacks into you again, and, oh, look, now you're in KO range, and now you're just sort of really behind. And you can't really deny Surskit too well. Wattrel comes in on the Hydra, on the Surf, actually. I feel like you might have been better going Toad, because then you can force some stuff, but this isn't bad either, because you're probably coming in on Sticky Web more than likely. Like, why would... Like, Fuecoco's not threatening this, so why would you just go for Surf? And this kind of presents a really bad time, because now Surskit actually has a lot of offensive presence, and Wattrel's your only real check to it, so you have to win the speed tie, and then you lose the speed tie. Which is really unfortunate, because now you have to bend over backwards to be even able to deal with Surskit in the first place, and you don't really have good options with any of your Pokemon, so that just sort of starts claiming kills. Mankey comes in. It can take one, but it has to go into close combat, at which point Zorua H and Bramblin get free stuff there, so yeah, just really bad matchup. So now we're 2-2, which is pretty yikes. I'm just gonna, yeah, there it is. So, we're not in a bad position, but there's definitely a lot of anxiety going around, because we need to win this week to get to finals. So then that means that we have to go to Kither versus, I believe this is Juan SG. Just, name's kind of weird. But we really need to win the rest of our games, because we can't tie, because then we go to tiebreaker. In usual rounds, you'll just tie, and then you both get points. But because this is semis, you have to win. So now we have Kither versus Juan SG. Juan's team is not bad, but I don't think it's too great into this matchup. It's really hard to deal with Sandile because you don't have a Dark Resist. So you're going to have a really rough time of it, especially because there's a Glimmet with a Grievard, so that means that you're going to have Hazard Stack. As well as a Drifloon, you're going to have a really hard time being able to remove those. So you're going to have to really be prepared for Sandile to start trucking you over. The good news is that there's no grass on the opposing team, so you have Spore going on. So that could be really nice, but the main issue is Hazard Stack is going to wear you down long term, so Juan has to play very aggressive in order to make sure that Sandile can't do too much, to make sure that hazards don't go up, that kind of stuff. So I'm expecting Juan to lead Diglett, and then Kither can probably lead Quacks or something. It's Quacks v Sandile. That's the main concern, because even if Kither leads Glimmet, what's the Sandile going to be? And most likely scenarios, probably Scarf. And it's very heads up from Juan doing that, is making sure, well, if that's actually Sandile, then I can deal with it pretty effectively. And even if it's not Sandile, if it's Glimmet, then I can threaten that, make sure hazards don't go up. But Kither makes a good play, goes to his own Quacks. And this just sort of starts a really awkward 1v1 where Quacks just kind of can't break over other Quacks because it doesn't have a lot of coverage moves. So Fungus comes on in here, Quaxly Roost, so that way it's nice and healthy. And then you sack Grievard to Spore, because you don't really need this to do much. All it really needs to do is block Quaxly's Rapid Spin. It does not need to be an offensive threat, and that's really good heads up from Kither. And then Glimmet comes on in, and Fungus can't really do too much. Wattrel comes on in, I think expecting either of Quaxly or Pawniard on the double switch. Possibly Drifloon as well, because it kind of threatens Fungus. But, like, because Spore is no longer active, Pawniard takes Fungus's hits really well. And Quaxly does too, well, not really, no. So you're probably trying to get Pawniard here. But Kither goes to Glimmet on a really good play, because that means now he can start setting up hazards, which are probably going to be up for the rest of the game. So, oh, that's Zorua H, so that way you could force that interaction in order to wear down the opponent's team even more. You don't mind about Toxic Debris all that much because you have a Fungus as well as a Glimmet. You have 2 of those. But then Fungus comes on in, takes some chip, but then the issue is, well, Mudshot's not going to do too much, but Glimmet can just go for as many hazards as it wants. It doesn't really care about what Fungus can do. It's more than likely Giga Drain and Sledge Bomb, and Glimmet takes those just fine. It's whatever. You don't have to worry about it too much. The more important thing is get up those hazards so that way you can wear down Juan's team, at which point more spikes get set up. Giga Drain, you don't care. Go to Pawniard to preserve Glimmet, so that way you have your own grounded poison as a result of, oh, well, there's a Glimmet on the other side. If I attack into it and I don't have a grounded poison, that's pretty bad. Very heads up from Kither. Wattrel comes on in, takes some chip damage. Then you Sword Stance here. And this is where things get really dicey for Juan, because you have to attack into this. You can't be too passive, because hazards are already set up, Sandile's threatening to sweep, so you have to be able to deal with this. So you go Fungus, and Pawniard goes for the Night Slash. Super effective, kills Zorua. Really bad for Juan, because if you were coming in on an expected sucker, then that was actually a really good play, but the issue is that Pawniard is too healthy, can take any attack from Wattrel, and you're just fine attacking into it. So now you're really behind. Diglett comes on in, and now this creates the really weird 50-50 where Pawniard can do Sucker Punch things, whereas Diglett can do Substitute things, and Diglett can attack into Pawniard really well. So does Pawniard Sucker Punch? Does Diglett Substitute? All that sorts of stuff. And they think about it for quite a bit. And just Sucker Punches, and Pawniard from here has a complete control over the game. And now the best you can really do is force a speed tie with Glimmet, and that's really bad, because Mudshot doesn't even kill Pawniard from here. If we go to Calc, we have Pawniard versus Glimmet, and Glimmet's Mudshot does about 50%, so, oh, that's the wrong one. It's really hard for Juan to deal with this, so it just loses Speed Tie, Iron Heads, and that's going to be the game. Because there's just way too much pressure from this Pawniard and the Sandile afterwards when there's no Dark Resist, that Kither just gets a really nice, really clean game. Now it's up 3-2 in our favor. Then we have second... Oh, no, this is 3-2, so this is Voltex versus H-Sawa. And this is Shelter team, which is going to be really good against this team. Because, and as you'll see in a second, I feel like I don't really need to explain what's going on here. But also, Voltex leads off really well, and you'll see why in a bit, because this is actually Scarf Houndor with Overheat, and Voltex leads off with Zorua H, which can take the hit, and then you go to Diglett. And this is really important, because what you can do, because it's Eviolite Diglett, is that you can get up rocks. And because Houndor is in Overheat, then it's not going to be doing too well. So that comes on in. And then you Memento, and then Shelter can come on in really easily because it's literally at minimum special attack. Takes that just fine, uses a Shell Smash, and then the game is essentially won at this point already. It's kind of sad, but that's just sort of how it is. Liquidations. Quaxly comes on in, and then all you have to do is tear a rock, hit your Rock Blast, Quaxly dies. And this is why I much prefer Mare or Toadstool as well as a Mare Core, something like that, just because it doesn't deal with, it deals with that so much better. Then Fungus comes in, dies to Rock Blast, and then there's not really all that much you can do, which is unfortunate. So, that's the game. So, then we get to the final match, which is 4-2, me versus Avito. And the biggest crap I had of this match is that I didn't nickname my Pokemon, and that's really sad. Avito is known for bringing these really weird teams. Man brought Mono Dragon and won. I'm probably going to do a video just on him, just because of how weird his teams were. But the important bit is that he likes bringing weird Mons. And I know what Silicobra and Wiglet do because I played Little Cup RU, where Silicobra and Wiglet are kind of okay, even their Wiglet's kind of bad. So, I am not threatened by this, but, I still have to keep it in mind because it has Sucker and Aqua Jet, which can really annoy Shelter over here. But seeing as there's a Pawniard and this is a ground type, it's more than likely Stealth Rock, which I can tell. It also has the ability to shed skin, so what its big claim to fame is that you get reliable recovery through Rest plus Shed Skin, but it's a bit RNG reliant, so that's a bit annoying. But the main idea is sweep with this. I don't know what this Drifloon set is going into it. It's pretty funny because it's a veto. So that's all you're going to know, is that it's going to be very interesting. And then you have Quaxley as your spinner and defensive core with Fungus. So that's pretty cool. Probably trying to prey on no water. Water resist, I should say. And then on my team, we have Nimble, Shelter, Drifloon, and based on my scout of Evito, I made sure to use these 3 mons because A, I'm kind of weak to hyper offense in my scout. Nimble was your best anti-hyper offense check. Shelter, because Evito's pretty weird versus it. He doesn't have a lot of the usual checks. For example, Shelter gets checked by stuff like Pawniard, Mariony, Toad School, Kerbrawler, and there's only one on this team, and that's Pawn, and you can kind of set up on Pawn as well. So I'm hoping to have him bring an unconventional team, which he does. And then finally I have Drifloon. He likes doing Limit Grievard, and that's really hard to get hazards off, so to make sure that I have them off, I run Defog Floon. So I can lead off pretty effectively with Deerling here, because at worst, Fungus comes in, and then I can do some weird things there. But Silicobra is probably going to want to bring out rocks, because I have 2 rock-weak Mons, and one of them is my really big attacker, which you don't have a great answer to. There's Floon, but as we're going to see, it's offensive, so you can't really check it too well. So I just lead off with Deerling versus Silicobra, and I just get some Headbutt Chip to see if I can get some stuff on there. Gets flinched twice. Go for the 3rd one to see if I can just get a free Mon. Gets paralyzed, but that's perfectly fine because I don't really need Deerling. There's no Toad I have to switch into all that much. And just being able to get that much chip on Silicobra already is really good. And I also have a little bit of a trick up my sleeve with this Deerling. It goes, so Silicobra goes for a rest. I have Trailblaze. Also, in case anybody was wondering, that's a max roll, 1 in 16. I checked the calcs on that afterwards. It's really weird. But being able to Trailblaze means that I'm now faster than Silicobra. I go to Glimmet here, as Evito goes to Glimmet, or Fungus, I should say. And the reason why I do that is Silicobra is more than likely not staying in here. I mean, it's already wounded, and if you don't know the calc, then you probably assume that's like a 2-hit KO for whatever reason. But also, like, do you really want to chance Paralyze Deerling versus Shedskin Silicobra? If I manage, like, it's actually really bad, because if I don't get parried, then this just dies, because I can just headbutt it twice. We already saw how much it did, so you want to be able to preserve that, be able to deal with it in some fashion. And then I go to Glimmet to try to set up rocks, I believe. And also because you can 2-hit KO Sand Snake over here. So then yes, I set up rocks for the express purpose of I want to wear down Pawn. Nimble's fine too. But I want to wear down Pawn, I want to wear down Drifloon. Get some chip damage on Fungus as well, so that way my shoulder can sweep endgame. And then because it's Silicobra versus Glimmet, what I can do is that I can go to Nimble, and Nimble threatens a KO on Silicobra, and I can really easily just click U-turn here, and nothing bad is really going to happen. I spent a lot of time here because it's revealed that this is not Oranberry Drifloon, and I'm not sure what to do against it, because I'm thinking it's more than likely just going to be Scarf. So I have to try and figure out what exactly is this Drifloon going to do to me, because Evito's weird, and he has really weird sets. So I decide that I'm going to go Glimmet, which is a pretty good choice, because it effectively walls Drifloon really well. But here we get to Evito Sauce, because he has Endure. I use Power Gem, and then oopsie daisy, this is actually Weakness Policy, which is really cool, because you can do that kind of effectively. Oh yeah, I have Endure, and then I can also block Priority because I have Endure, it's higher, and then you can Unburden, so you effectively give yourself a Shell Smash. And then it also has Hypnosis, and I'm just sort of set, like, I just sort of have to take it, which is unfortunate, but that's just what I have to do. And I'm kind of fine with losing Glimmet at this point. It doesn't really check anything important. Like, don't really need it for Pawniard because I have Diglett, I have Drifloon with Will-O-Wisp, I have Nimble. It's all A-okay. And then it kills Glimmet, that's perfectly fine. And then from here, I need to make sure that I don't have something else die to this really offensive threat. It could just endure through first impression, and Sucker Punch from Diglett is a bit of a guessing war, and I don't want to have to deal with Hypnosis shenanigans. So instead, I go to Shelter, because it has Ice Shard. Also, rest in peace, Tongue Lashing, you need to have your nickname. But yeah, then just Ice Shard here, get a little bit of chip there. And then it's perfectly fine for me to go into Deerling, like, every single time here. I don't really mind if this goes down, because I don't need it to check anything at this point, really. Because stuff is worn down, so it's all okay. I think I just go for a Zen hit. Do I go for a Zen headbutt? I feel like I do. Yes, I do. So then I go Drifloon, expecting him to Rapid Spin. If he doesn't Rapid Spin, then all I really have to do is just go for Acrobatics, go for Will-O-Wisp. It's all okay. Goes for Brave Bird, actually. Eat my Oran Berry. Now I'm really threatening because I have Unburden, and this is not in a position to really take any attacks from it. So then from there, goes to Drifloon, sack that, because you don't really need it. I think I go for Will-O-Wisp, yeah. And then Fungus comes in, because if you do the calc, Fungus, and then we have Drifloon, and then we remove Oran Berry. And then Acrobatics does not kill. It's close to, but it doesn't guarantee it. And that's if I'm running the usual set, because if we go back to this, more than likely, like, oh, it's probably going to be Defog, Will-O-Wisp, Acrobatics, Terra Blast fighting. However, I made an optimization because I'm not a big fan of Terra Blast fighting on my Drifloons. So instead, I use Terra Blast, well, Terra Flying to boost up my Acrobatics, and it kills this, which is really good positioning for me, because that means I no longer have to deal with it, and the only thing on Avito's team that's even in condition to deal with this Drifloon is the Pawniard, which I need to have chipped down for Shelter to come in and sweep. So, Pawniard comes on in, and then I hit my Will-O-Wisp, and then Ironhead doesn't do too much, and then for some reason this Drifloon can almost 1v1 a Pawniard, which sounds very weird, but it can. I'm not one to ask questions, I'm just stating the facts here. So then Ironhead, and then I think it's Sucker Punches on this turn, which is perfectly fine. I don't really mind Drifloon going down here. It's done enough work. I have Shelters primed to go and sweep here, and even if it doesn't sweep for whatever reason, like this is Thunder Wave Pawniard, well, I have Nimble. And Nimble can deal with everything else here, so it's fine. So then that goes down. Then I go to Shelter, make sure that I'm okay. Low sweep doesn't really matter too much. It matters because Wigglet gets this high enough speeds here. But then I Shell Smash, and then Ice Shard to make sure I don't take any chip damage. Wigglet comes in, and I make sure, for the life of me, to make sure that Wigglet cannot kill me and goob my entire playstyle, because it can do some specially offensive stuff because it has like Hydro Pump and Ice Beam, and that's sort of how it's running Lil Cup RU. But I want to make sure that Shelter can actually sweep, because this is a really weird Pokemon to see ever. And then it goes for Stomping Tantrum, which doesn't even KO me. I'm at -1. This is Life Orb, Terra Ground, and that's not like a terribly weak attack. It just doesn't kill Shelter because Shelter's goated. And then from there, I just go from Ice Shard and win the game, because Avito has no more resources, and I can just hit my Rock Blast. It's all okay. And even if I don't, then what happens is that Nimble can come in after Shelter dies, and just first impression into the team, and then switch out to, like, I don't know, Deerling or something. Or even just U-turn, actually. And then Quaxley can't deal with the rest of my team, so it's all okay. But then just go kill Silicobra, and just like that, we are in Grand Finals. 5-2. Oh boy, we have a week off because, as of Winter League, the other two teams that are in semis, which are Wattrels and Summer Sunkerns, I don't know why it's that name. It's so weird. They are currently in tiebreak because they went 4 for 4, so we get a week off. I'm hoping to go over that sometime, of like what those matches were, because they're pretty high level. But I'm not sure when I'm going to get to them. I still have to do my edited videos and all that sort of stuff. But thank you all very much for watching. I hope this was entertaining and helps get you into the mind of what like really high level players have to do in team tours. And thank you all very much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, it would be greatly appreciated. And as always, have a good day.